Welcome to Living Intention. And I'm your host, Alpha Mshihiri. It is such a pleasant day and moment for each and every one of us to be able to engage in something fabulous. And I'm here today talking to you of something of great importance. And not only that it's of great importance, it has significant value in helping us becoming better being in each and every step. And this is nothing other than a subject of faith over fear. First, I want to hear from you. What do you think about this very issue of faith over fear? What is your perspective? What do you think? And how do you feel about your fear and how directs your life, how it governs your behavior? And is faith enough to overcome that? I hope you have your answer, but I'm here to share with you a best way you can approach life through this concept of fear and faith. In fact, ancient Chinese have something called yin and yang. And in a sense, yin and yang is like faith and fear because they have to coexist. In absence of one, then life cannot be complete. And in fact, maybe there won't be life at all. Faith is necessary, so as fear is important in each and every day of our life. Because imagine if you have no fear at all. Taking a walk somewhere on the street, in a busy street, and you see a car coming and you're crossing because you are fearless. You pay no attention to that car that is driving in a very high speed. I think you know the outcome. Imagine climbing up the building, no fear at all. You are fearless. And you stand at the top of the building and decided that you're going to walk on the cloud. And you take your first step away from the very concrete that you're standing on and put your first foot, that it's the right feet, on the cloud. You know what will happen. Gravity will pull you down and you will find yourself in the floor and maybe not knowing what hit you. And if there's such a place called afterlife, therefore, you will find yourself in that very place. So fear is necessary, more necessary than we ever understand. But fear is not something that we should hold us back. If we give an understanding it deserves, it's no longer a boogeyman. Fear has become the boogeyman that we talk about. A boogeyman that really does not exist, is sitting in a closet, but terrorize our ability to go to the closet and grab that which is important. But when we have the understanding that the boogeyman in the closet is nothing but the shadow of myself, then it changes my relationship with that which is dark inside the closet. Because as a child, maybe most of us, we've heard these stories. And when you think of a boogeyman sitting behind the closet that is dark, it represents this idea of uncertainty. It is dark inside that closet. I don't know what will pop up. Because even a simple drop of a cloth will terrify us. Because it is an element of unknown. So anything that will make noises will terrorize us, for the fact that maybe it is that boogeyman coming out to get me. But once you understand that there's nothing else in the closet but clothes themselves in the dark that they're sitting in, all you need is a light to bring up enlightenment. And with that enlightenment, you will be able no longer to fear of the unknown. It minimizes, it diminishes completely this idea of darkness. So light must be present. And the only expression of light is if it is exposed to darkness. I hope that makes sense. If it does, I would love to get some thumbs up. But regardless, I just want to further explore that subject. When you think of dark and light, you have to, in order for you to know there is light, there must be dark in place. If the world was only bright and there's not an inkling of darkness, we wouldn't have known what darkness is. And if the world was completely dark, we would have known what light is unless there's darkness and light is introduced. Then you become aware of the two. And the difference is obvious. And you say, what does that mean? Have you ever been in a room that is completely total dark? The moment when the light was on, but when you turn off the light, suddenly you cannot see anything because your eyes were used to see that light. And therefore, when that light goes away, the adjustment of your light, your eyes, is not fast enough to adjust to the darkness. But close your eyes for 5 minutes along with that darkness, and then open your eyes slowly. Suddenly, you can see something. You might not see as clearly as when the light was on, but you will be able to move clearly because your eyes will adjust to the dimness of the light that is there. And unless you are in a total pitch darkness, then that is a different experience. But still, your nerves will be calm enough to be able to move around versus when the light just went out. This symbolizes or informs me that the absence of one or the other does not deny us the right to exist if we understand it. And so is fear. Fear is nothing, just an emotional that we are reacting to something that will go wrong. A dangerous thing must be present before us or must be before us. And it is this element of, because that dangerous thing, it is something that it places us in the place of unknown. So think of those examples I provided. As you're about to cross the road, if you have no fear at all, you will step in the middle of the road and you'll be hit by the car, and who knows what will happen from there on. It is that knowledge of what inevitable can happen. I mean, what can possibly happen? I'll repeat that word. What can possibly happen becomes something that we are afraid, that cause us not to pursue the path that will lead us to the harm that we perceive to exist. So when you're afraid, it is nothing but an emotional that is learned, something you have learned that doing this might not be the right way. Just like crossing the freeway, it is something fear will prevent us unless we overcome it, but it will prevent us from crossing that road when the road is busy. But taking the same scenario, if I have to cross a road in a rural area where there's hardly any cars, or even cars, if they're there, they are very slow, and there's an understanding that people are crossing that road, so the drivers are always cautious, my level of fear will be different. Still, I'm crossing the road, but that which you have learned about the environment that I am in diminishes the level of fear. Today, if you ask me to cross a freeway that is probably 4-lane in the middle of cars are just crossing that road at 60 miles an hour, and you ask me to cross, my heart will beat, almost want to jump out of my chest. And chances are I will paralyze and I will not be able to cross it. But every day when I go, I decided to go for a walk. There's a gas station close to my house. There is a grocery store close to my house. And often, instead of driving to go to any of these areas, I like to walk. And on summertime, sometimes I walk even farther. There's other stores way farther, more than a mile from the house. I take a walk because I want to exercise. I want to breathe air outside instead of engulfing myself inside. And I will cross multiple roads in that process. Yet I am not terrified, because I know in each and every road, even if it's a little bit busier, there's a zebra crossing lines. And if there's no zebra crossing line, there's a stop sign. And I understand how to behave and minimize the danger, the risk involved. But if you take the same scenario and place me on a freeway, I will be terrified to do so. So why is that important? I put a lot of more time in discussing fear because I want us to understand that fear can be minimized. How much are we afraid of the thing? To the degree that paralyzes, it is based on the knowledge we have on the matter in question. So if the matter in question, like I talked about, example of the road, knowing that road, the likelihood of me experiencing the danger that I perceive to exist, which is accident or being hit by the car, if the degree of it is higher, therefore my fear level increases. But I can minimize that degree by gaining a different knowledge. Let's take an example. If I have to cross that road and the drivers have an understanding, or the car are automatic cars in a sense that if they sense an object before it, maybe a feet away or 2 feet, 3 feet, 5 feet, those cars will automatically stop. That knowledge, having that information, it minimizes my level or the anxiety or the degree of fear or that which I perceive to have to happen. So in an essence, I've minimized the risk so as the elevation of the fear is minimized, because I know it is unlikely that that thing will happen. Just like me crossing the local road. It is possible a crazy driver might choose not to stop, neither pay attention to the person who's crossing on zebra crossing, or they might be in the phone distracted, and by the time they lift up their head, they see you, an accident can happen. All of these things are possible, but the likelihood of them happening is very minimum, and therefore I will cross the road with confidence. The other day, as I was before winter, so I think I wouldn't call it the other day, a few months ago, I was running. Meaning jogging. I'll take another word, not running. I was jogging in the track that I usually jog, and it's a trail, but it takes me through this neighborhood and all that stuff. And I love that because it gives me, it takes me, it's a meditative moment I use. But as I was jogging, I came across a zebra crossing line, and so the pedestrian have the right of crossing. And as I was kind of coming across, there was 2 cars coming. And both of them actually stopped because in front of me, there was a lady who was standing where to cross. So those cars stopped to give her the right of path so she can cross. I came right behind her and I proceeded to cross that road. She stood there. She didn't cross. And in fact, one of the drivers was honking, telling her to cross. They're giving her the right to cross after I have already crossed. Yet the lady refused to cross. And I was wondering what's going on. Maybe she was waiting for somebody, but I didn't see, because I came behind her, I didn't see anybody as I was jogging through that path. So it was obvious she wasn't waiting for anybody. And I'm wondering, what is she doing? And I kept going and minding my own business, but I kept looking back. Eventually, about maybe a minute later, those cars decided to go ahead. And after she looked back on both sides and saw no car crossing, she decided to cross. And you wonder why she did that. The fear that the driver might move, something wrong might happen, was significantly higher than her desire to step and cross that road. For whatever reason, she was not comfortable that those cars can just stop. She was afraid that even in the midst that they stop, they can move, and maybe that's the reason why. So she was terrified with that idea, and she waited until all went by, and that's when she crossed the road, despite the fact she saw me crossing right before her. So her fear, despite the fact that there was an element of safety in place, still paralyzed her or terrified her or held her back from acting what was right within her means or her way. So today, most of us, because we have less understanding of fear, and this is not something bad, because we're living in an information where we're living in a world where information are instantly provided to us. And some of the information are made to be so digestible, consumable, and they feed in our very element of fear. They bring about or they speak of unknown, and if that unknown is relating to a particular area of our lives, so therefore we become afraid. Me and my wife today, we had a very simple discussion on a very simple subject. She was telling me that this is what is happening in the news, and she kept repeating this word over and over. It's a controversial subject. But I told her, and she kept referencing of things and situations in support of her argument or her statement or understanding. And I said, I understand what people are saying, and they're saying it because of that which they are seeing or hearing. And because they are seeing something and they're hearing something, so therefore they can make a conclusion, this is what is happening. I said, let's go to the source of information. So we went to the source of information. And as we were scouring through that source, it became obvious there is more to the story than what it is said in the news. Because we have to understand every situation we are facing, there's a point of view that we're facing from. If I am looking at a lion at a particular angle, it might not look as a lion. But if I change my angle, which is my point of view, it might become obvious it's a lion. And therefore, I will be terrified. But my first angle did not provide me that view. I heard a story of an old lady. There was a dog in her neighborhood, always kind of roam around. And she always kind of talked to the dog would come by her house and bark, and she would talk to this dog and just like, get out of my house, get out, because she was concerning that the dog will help itself at her yard. And she didn't want that to happen. So she'll keep yelling at the dog and everything else, and the dog will bark, woo, woo, woo. And they have this conversation. The dog is barking and she's yelling at the dog. And it has been a routine. And she complains about it. And sometimes she threatened the dog, if you come close to me, I'm going to hit you with my stick. And she had a stick always ready to hit this dog if it happens to. So one day, and she lives by the zoo. So one day, a lion was able to escape the fence within the zoo. And this lion, and the lady was doing her business and minding her business, and she left the door open, her door open. Normally she does that all the time. So the lion came in and walked into the house and went and hid in the closet. But as the lady came, she could see that the mark on the floor, and her first thought was, it is that dog. And she followed the mark and she saw the mark. They were going into the closet, and she went and grabbed, and she's like, oh my God, I got this dog today. I got this dog. And she was excited. So there she went and grabbed her stick, the stick that she always have when she is having this verbalization with the dog outside. She grabbed it, and when she opened, the closet is kind of sitting in a corner where it's a little bit darker. So as she opened that closet to scare the dog, and she could see this figure, and her first impression was, that must be the dog then. And she started hitting the dog, said, I told you when I find you, I'm going to hit you. And she kept hitting the dog and hitting the dog. And the lion was kind of like cringing. And she was hitting the dog with mighty force. And she kept hitting, and she's yelling and talking in it. So the zookeepers are running around the neighborhood looking for So you have this zookeeper now. They are running around looking for the lion who escaped the zoo. And as they're going to the neighborhood and just kind of peeping and they see this house, that the door is open, and they're hearing noises like a woman is yelling. So the first thought is, oh, maybe that's a place. So they run into and trying to wander, and they kept calling, hello, hello, hello. And they're hearing these noises. And they storm into the house because the door was open, and they could hear the sound from a particular corner. So they run into the corner, and this lady said, I'm gonna kill you today. They're like, what's going on? And she's like, this dog. I keep telling this dog never to come on my backyard. Today the dog entered my house. I'm gonna kill this dog. And so the zookeeper said, which dog? And they're peeping, and they're like, no, that's not a dog. And the fear now they had to respond with in order to prevent the woman, because they figure the lion will react and tear up that woman. The first thing they jumped, they were screaming and yelling and grabbing her and move her, and they tranquilizing the lion. But the lion was terrified in that closet. And they took the lady. And once the lady realized that it was actually she was facing a lion, she lost conscious. So, why that story is important in the scheme of fear and faith? In her mind, she had made an assumption that that which was in the closet was a dog. And because it was a dog, she could handle it with her stick. That's the assumption she made in her mind. And she was sure of that assumption because she'd never had an experience where the lion escaped the zoo. And maybe in her assumption, again, it was improbable for a lion to escape the zoo. She could not have perceived that possibility. So the only thing she thought was, is the dog. And because she felt that she could handle it, and therefore she grabbed a stick and went and dealt with it. And she dealt with it in a mighty way that the lion was paralyzed by this human being, frailly young old lady. But when she realized or learned that which she faced, she paralyzed. I mean, she lost conscious. I apologize for the word. She lost conscious. So what is the difference there? Is the understanding she gained. In one side, she had an understanding that was different, and therefore her response was consistent with that understanding. But when the understanding changed, her response was also different to reflect the new understanding. Why she responded differently? In the first incident, she responded with faith, knowing that she can handle the dog based on the perception she had. But when she realized the actually creature or animal she was dealing with was most vicious animal, a lion, the king of the jungle itself, or himself. And that knowledge is what terrified her. So their fear is an emotional that is learned. She have learned through years of her life, through stories and through all kind of things or information she had provided, that a lion is the most dangerous creature you can ever face. And having that understanding, she responded consistently. She actually lost conscience. That's how much fear was upon her. So, if that is true, which is in that particular story, we can say that fear, first, is an emotional. It's an emotional response. And that emotional response is an emotional response based on a perception that something unpleasant will happen. Because fear, if we go through a situation and overcome it, fear is neutralized. You're no longer afraid of the fact. But fear speaks of a future expectation, an expectation that something wrong will happen. And depending on the degree, so how much can I lose if that goes wrong? An example, if you ask me to walk on a rope, but maybe the rope is about 5 feet away from the ground, and on the ground there's this nice air cushion mattress that is sit there. So if I cannot walk on the rope and fall, that cushion bubble air, whatever is sitting down there on the ground, will be able to cushion my fall, and it will be much, much simpler. Having that understanding, this is what happened in my mind. The perception or the perceived probability of me falling is still remain to be higher because the rope is very thin. But having an understanding that there is something that will cushion my fall minimize the intensity of that perception, the degree how that perception can affect me. So, therefore, because I have a different understanding, when I'm start walking on that rope, the level of fear will be minimized. And actually, likely I'm going to say, I'm going to give it a try because it will be something exciting. Take the same scenario. If you place me to walk on a rope and there is nothing, even if it's a 3 feet from the ground, and there is nothing on the ground, I know, just like I knew previously, that the likelihood of me falling is still higher. It's more probable than improbable. And since it is more probable and I have no mitigating factor, I might not be able to take my first step on that rope. While I will do so without fear, with minimum fear, when I know there's something to cushion my fall. So what changes? The circumstances are the same in terms of walking on the rope. It's the knowledge that we have as it relates to what happens if we fall or if something inevitable. In essence, the fear is not walking on the rope. The fear is walking on the rope and fall. If you can minimize the fall aspect and being hurt, you minimize the degree of fear you have. And what this tells us, if you take it in all things possible in life, it says if there is something that we are afraid of, we shouldn't feel terrible for being fearful of that which we are afraid of. So fear is a natural emotion which intends to protect us from acting out of our ordinary circumstances when the level degree of uncertainty is higher. That's what fear is. So therefore, when you have that understanding, you say, okay, so I am facing a situation where the level or the degree of uncertainty is higher. What can I do to minimize that level? That is the question that we ask ourselves. So once you have an understanding, if I minimize the level of uncertainty, it makes my job much, much easier. When I started this job I've been coaching people in a non-common environment. I mean, somebody comes and say, I'm going through this situation emotionally, and I need some guidance. I see that you have this, I see the way you carry yourself, and I feel like you can be able to help me from point A to point B. I'm stuck. And I will sit with most of those people. I will walk them through the process that I call a 3I framework. I will guide them what they need to do and how they can do it. And they will come with questions and I'll providing the answers. And this was not, wasn't a business. It was just something I'm doing it for as part of my journey in life. But when I decided to make this a formal business where professionally I can be able to coach people, suddenly there was a fear. How do I do it? I've been doing it all along. But that question I'm asking myself, how do I do it? Because I am formalizing a process that was informal before. And I struggled with it for a little bit. I pondered and wondered and went out and about. But eventually I came across some training. And the training changed my perspective because now somebody have done it. And they have creating this framework that I can adapt. And it will minimize that element of uncertainty. Because me doing myself, I was wondering, okay, am I going to be doing it right? These people who I was dealing with, they came to me based on how they saw I carried myself. And those who I helped them, they went and told somebody else. And that somebody else came to me. And I helped them, but it was an informal manner. There was no a way of doing it, nothing else. I'll just guide them. And I enjoyed it because it was helping me to grow as well. Because I was teaching them something that I'm already doing. And I was carefully making sure that I share with them that which I have done. So it was a personal experience that was ongoing. Because it was as such, I felt confident and I was comfortable doing that. And I've done it for a handful of people. And each and every one of them came with a very positive feedback. They call me brothers, they do this. I mean, they were so pleased. But when I said I'm going to make it formal now, I'm going to be talking to somebody who I have never met, don't know. I'm the one who invited them to me in my world of coaching. Suddenly, the degree of uncertainty, because I didn't know whether doing the way I was doing was the way it should be done. And that level of uncertainty of not knowing made me fearful. And I struggled with the idea and I wanted to just abandon it. But there was this desire, deep desire in me, because I went through some traumatic situation and I was able to overcome it. And I learned through that process and period of time that I went through that many people are struggling in some area of their lives and they're traumatized without knowing. And I wanted to share with people to help alleviate their pain so they can live life meaningful and become more productive and they can enjoy life in a more meaningful manner. And it was that drive. That drive kept knocking, telling me, you know what, why don't you do it? While on the other side, I was afraid. I was afraid because I didn't know whether there is a framework, there is a policy and procedures people need to follow. Do you need a certification? Do you need to be certified? Do you need to be, I mean, there was so much was going on that I didn't know when I decided to do it as a professional. Since I didn't have the knowledge to minimize or mitigate that which I perceived could go wrong, what if I do it the wrong way and somebody go and sue me? Or what if I do it the wrong way and something goes wrong? What if there, so there was all this what if something goes wrong? But then I went back to apply the same principle that I was teaching others to do. I had to coach myself to overcome that fear. I said I was looking at the wrong thing. I was looking on the fear side. So what if something goes right? What if people are very pleased with that which I share with them? It is something different than they're used to. What if it changes somebody else's life like I've done before? And by thinking of that, suddenly I started looking and said, oh, so how do I do the what if, that which is good? And I acquire knowledge and understanding by taking a course. So that information I learned from the course was very useful because it provided me a guidance and structure that I felt that was approved, acceptable by the market. And by having that understanding, it minimized, it neutralized the level of uncertainty. And when the level of uncertainty was minimized, it changes my perspective. And so, therefore, I was no longer afraid or concerned or fearful of that which I was experiencing. I felt comfortable. And first, of course, I started practicing the framework that I learned on terms of how to coach, how to talk to people, how to cue them to give you the responses. I've done all of these things, but in an informal manner. And now I realize a lot of things that I was doing is natural and normal, need to be done in order to be able to help people. So I incorporate those because I learned something new. So the information I gained minimized or mitigated the level of uncertainty. So it is the level of uncertainty that we become fearful of. And that's why earlier I used the boogeyman model, where people talk about this boogeyman and you're afraid of the boogeyman. You're afraid of the closet because there might be a boogeyman in the closet. Because the level of uncertainty, boogeymen represent this level of uncertainty. And the more apparent that level of uncertainty is, the higher the degree of fear. And its sole intent is to prevent us from being hurt. I am afraid when I am boiling water or I'm cooking food. I'm afraid to put my finger on the food because I know, based on knowledge, a hot pot. If I put my finger, what will do to that finger? But if I wear a glove that is thicker, or is fireproof or fire whatever fire level, I would no longer have the same fear to put my finger on that particular part. So the knowledge changes my level of or degree of uncertainty. And once the degree of uncertainty is minimized, so my perceived threat is minimized. And when perceived threat is minimized, the fear level drops down significantly. I hope that you're getting that. I hope that makes sense. That if it does, I would love to get a thumbs up. If you're listening to this, whatever you are, just give a thumbs up, give a clap, give a fire, whatever icon you might find in your phone or device that you're watching or listening from. Just react to the information. And if I'm helping you, do the same thing. If you're getting it, you're following through. And why I'm taking you through this journey, and I've been focusing on the idea of fear so far. I want you to understand fear. Fear is not your enemy. Once we learn to embrace fear, then we neutralize it. I was talking to a group of people the other time, and I brought an example that maybe might be relevant into this conversation as well. And I asked them to think of being living in this particular neighborhood. So I'm going to walk you through this process. Just place yourself, you're living in this neighborhood. It's a very nice neighborhood. You have your house and you love your house and you love to take your walks at night. Let's assume you have a back alley. You have the front main street, the road on the front, and you have a back alley. Some neighborhood have the back alley. So imagine yourself, you're always taking this back alley and you're enjoying because usually there's lights and you know your neighborhood. Then you have maybe a neighbor, maybe your closest neighbor or third house neighbor, that is one of your neighbor, whom most of you as neighbors considered him or her weird. Weird because the house is unkept, and he or she always act strangely, dressed up funny, and always do this funny, stupid stuff that makes no sense at all. So all the characters of being off exist with this neighbor. So let's assume one evening you're walking. As you've always done, you're taking your normal walk in the evening. And it seems the lights are dim, so it's a little bit darker, and it's a back alley. And as you're walking, you see this figure from the distance coming towards you. As far as you look farther from that distance, you cannot recognize who that person is. And normally other neighbors who walk that alley appears to dress up normal, so you can have an idea of that figure is a resembling figure. But this figure seems to be a little bit off, weird, stranger. And you keep walking. The first instinct in your mind is, oh my God, am I in danger? And your heart will start beating. And if you see the person who's walking, swaying from left to right throughout that alley and just walking, and you, as far from the distance, you can't really tell, but it looks off by the type of walk, the fear will come upon you. Because that which you are looking poses a threat. And as long as you cannot recognize and you don't know how to respond to it, the degree of fear is heightened because the level of uncertainty is higher. I don't know who that person is. And because I don't know that person is, I don't know the level of threat that they are posing against me. And that degree of unknowing is one that actually makes you afraid. Because your mind enters, or psychologically you enter into this fight-fright mode, getting ready to protect yourself from the inevitable. Your heart will start beating so that more blood can be supplied in your body, so that you can be able to run. Energy is pushed in your muscles to be able to flight or fight, whatever the case you may have to face. But imagine if you're taking those steps, you're looking at your neighbors and like, okay, can I run to my neighbor? And you see that all the neighbors, the lights are off, and you're like, oh my God, where can I do? Can I run back instead of going forward where I'm going to face this person? And as you start questioning yourself or raising these questions, you keep moving forward slowly while you're trying to determine the exit route. Suddenly you look and recognize, oh, that is that weird neighbor. The mere fact that you have recognized the weird neighbor, suddenly there is knowledge has been introduced in your mind, and that knowledge will slowly neutralize the very element of uncertainty. So now I know what I'm facing or who I'm facing. The level of uncertainty or the degree of uncertainty is reduced. Yes, it is a weird neighbor, but at least I know it is that weird neighbor, not anyone stranger who I cannot perceive what they might be able to do. And as you come closer, you're going to start rationalizing, you know what? Yes, you might still probably be afraid because this weird neighbor is weird, but based on the fact that the neighbor is a known person and you have never seen him acting any violently, apart from being weird in terms of his or her dress or the way they talk or walk or the way they deal with things in life, you are going to have a minimum level of fear. Your heartbeat will slow, yet because the neighbor is weird, there's a level of uncertainty still exists. But let's assume as you look up at the place you're coming closer to the neighbor, you see the neighbor smiling, this weird neighbor smiling. The smile from the weird neighbor becomes an indication that it's a friendly encounter. A neighbor is likely to treat you in a friendly manner. And therefore, that information will completely neutralize the uncertainty level that you once had. So, what changes the fear is not the circumstances, but the knowledge you have as a result of. So, information that we consume can either elevate or mitigate that which we perceive as a threat. Once you start understanding that, then fear becomes something different. It is not permanent. It is a perception. It is not even real in a sense that this must happen. It can be mitigated, it can be neutralized, it can be avoided. And when you look at each and every aspect of fear we are facing, those elements remain to be true. Having understanding that, then it's easier to deal with fear. And I gave fear a lot of conversation because it is the biggest boogeyman of the two. And today we are facing so many elements or degree of fear based on the information we receive. We are told this is happening, that is going on, and this does not minimize that which is real happening. As an example of the neighbor is real, the neighbor is weird. Anything is possible out of the weird person. So even a person who is not weird, majority of the people, when you read these stories, just recently there was I think it's a Long Island or Rhode Island. I think it's a Long Island, if I'm not mistaken, and you can correct me. There was a serial killer recently was arrested, and this guy is a husband, a father, a professional. The neighbors couldn't even could not expect him of being one of the serial killer has been killing these women. They would have not been able to imagine that is possible. He didn't look any different. But he posed significant threat to their daughters, to the wives in that neighborhood, because he was only killing women. So those women, if they knew who he is, they would not feel comfortable around his company. So you take the same scenario. If these women were jogging or walking, even one woman from that neighborhood, from that block, was walking or jogging, and they saw this gentleman, their neighbor, they would not be afraid. They will feel safe and comfortable. They know who he is. as the father of so and so, as the husband of so and so, as the neighbor who lives in that particular house. It's likely they will just continue to jog no matter how dark it is and say hi, but not knowing the person beside them is a lion. Just like the story of the lady. They did not have the knowledge that speaks of the nature of their neighbor. As the old lady, she did not have the knowledge that speaks of the nature of the animal who was in her closet. And your fear is because you have a knowledge of the animal before you, the nature of the person by your side. So you're afraid because you know that what possibly could happen based on the knowledge you have. So if the knowledge appear to be real, meaning that I can't change that, that's true. Before I can answer that question, how you do that, let's talk about faith. Faith is simply an opposite of fear. It speaks of what is possible. It speaks of what could be, and it is based on a perception. My point of view will determine what I think it's possible and what I think it's impossible. I'll take a very simple example, no matter how controversial it might be, but I'm going to highlight the element of faith and how it plays in our life, the importance of it, and how can you capitalize on it. And then at the end, if you stay long enough, I'm going to give you a framework that you can use to enhance your faith. A framework that works for a handful of people. Not only that it works, it transformed their lives. And they found calm and peace in the midst of a chaotic world. An example. I was having a conversation with a very good friend of mine. And a few years ago, they don't live United States. But a few years ago, they came to United States for a visit. The wife was ill. I mean, they get here, they were healthy. It was a 1 month vacation. But when they were here, something happened, and the wife suddenly got some complications. And one of the things that when they went to the hospital for an emergency, they were told that the wife cannot travel. It is the doctor recommended that she should not travel, especially on the air. She was not due like in a month or two, but they said the situation that has happened might induce labor anytime, and it will require not. It may require not a natural labor, a natural birth. It have to be a C-section. And her conditions and situations did not favor them. I mean, for the wife to travel. So he asked me, he said, what can I do? And he was concerned and everything else. And I said, okay, listen, it's an accident. It wasn't planned. You have work, go back to work. Your wife can stay with us here. And if the situation changes and improve in a sense that she'll be able to join you and she'll be home soon. And he felt comfortable, and she agreed to the fact. She's like, okay, I think it's best that way because we don't want to risk the baby. Long story short, she wasn't able to travel. Actually, her situation got a little bit worse, and about a month and a half later or so, she had the doctors decided to induce labor, and the baby was born. After the baby was born, I think the baby had to stay in the hospital for about a month or so, and later the baby was reunited with the mother because it was not time yet for the baby to be born. So, but after being incubated on a incubator or something to that effect, eventually the baby had grown enough, and then they were able to unite the two. So, because that baby was born in the United States, by default, the baby was given a social security card, and when the mom was about to return back to their home country, guess what? The baby couldn't just travel with nothing. They had to get a passport for the baby, an American passport, and they went back, and That is probably about, it's over maybe about 15 years ago. And the babe the child is grown up now. It's an older I mean, still in school. Have never been to United States ever since. So recently, after Trump administration came into power and talked about, I think, I don't know if it's an order was issued, but the conversation, they go all, nowadays news are all over the place. She heard, or that couple has heard that they the people who, if the father and the mother were not citizen or permanent resident, if a child is born, cannot be a United States citizen. And they were terrified. They were terrified by the fact. And they were wondering. They went and consult lawyers in their local country, and the reason they had to do so, because that child does not have the passport of, or the right, because it's not a citizen of that country. And now they are wondering, where is this child going to be a citizen of? Because in their, I think the child is past 16, and in their country, this child was supposed to decide whether they're going to be a citizen of that country, of the parent country, or remain the citizen of the United States. And since after on that age of 15, the child did not make that decision, therefore is not a citizen of the country that the parents are from. Instead, is a citizen of the United States. And now this order comes in place, and they were terrified by the fact, so what is going to happen to their child? But I hadn't talked to them for some time. So eventually, the other day, some situation happened, and we end up connecting a conversation. And in our conversation, they just kind of brought it up, the issue, with great concern. They were afraid, if I use the right word, since we're having a conversation of fear. They were very, very much afraid. They've been praying, they've been doing all these things, but fear cannot come out of their mind. So in the conversation, when they brought to my attention, I said, "Oh, what were you talking about?" They said, "Oh, yeah, this order Trump just set. So we don't know what to do, because lawyers here, they're telling us this our son is not a citizen of this country." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I kind of had to think about it a little bit, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, you're talking about the order." I said, "There's two things happens." I said, "Yeah, I've heard of the order. I haven't read, nor have I looked at the news as they speak to that effect. But the order can only be, because it's not a law, it cannot be made retroactive." So I had to explain to them. I said that every president can make what we call an executive order, which is the policy, if you want to call it a policy change. And each president have the right to interpret certain element of the law, and being able to provide what we would have called an executive order or policy change in order to execute their administrative responsibilities. And of course, those orders often are open to challenge through the court, whether the president or the administration have made legal interpretation to the law, or they've interpreted the law consistent with its spiritual standard, or spirit of the law. And the court will evaluate, and that's commonly usually happens, especially if the order is perceived controversial by a lot of people. So I said, my understanding first, that order is in court, and therefore that order, as it speaks to, is not yet in effect, because the court have not decided one way or the other. So it's not in effect. That's one way. So number one. Number two, 15 years ago, your son was born in the United States. Such order was not in existence. These orders, because our policy changes, they cannot be retroactive. They cannot go back and say, I'm going to do it. They become proactive. They start from there and going forward throughout the time of that administration. And if the next president does not change that order, it will remain to be in effect. And it will continue to be as long as it becomes, or unless there's a change of law. I said, my understanding, I'm not a lawyer person, I'm not a legal person, but my understanding is Congress is the one that have the authority to make something retroactive, where they can create a law and say that law either starts from there going onward, or it affects anybody prior to that period of time, to whatever period of time it need to go far. So after breaking it down, that process to them, suddenly you could see the relief. And in fact, they said, but the passport will already expired. I said, it doesn't matter. I said, do you have your birth certificate for your son? They said, oh yeah, we have it. Do you have his social security card? They said, oh, we have it. I said, then just take it to the United States Embassy and they will be able to process a new passport. And so they were concerned, but the baby was, when we got the passport, the baby was young. The picture, I said, technology, I said, those things are things that are needed. And therefore, by taking them there, whatever else the embassy will require or ask of, they will let you know. But don't be afraid. That's all you need in order to get your passport. And you guys have a birth certificate, and you can demonstrate that you are the father and your wife is the mother by demonstrating your marriage certificate and your birth certificate as well, so that they can be able to collaborate the story you're telling, and you should be fine. And do you have a copy of your old passport of the baby? They said yes. I said, therefore, you got enough. Take all of that and you should be able to get your passport. Their fear suddenly disappear. Not because the circumstances have changed. The child is not in the United States. The order is still in place. The president is still Trump. So the circumstances that brought about that level of fear and concern, it is still present. But knowledge have changed their understanding. So if that is fear, so is faith. And we're told, and I'm going to be able to kind of go back and look at the scripture here if it's okay. Don't be offended, because the scriptures is just writing, just like science. I looked at scriptures as science before science became. It is psychology before psychology became. Because truthfully, if you look at the spirit of the letter, you will discover that most of what science is telling us today, most of what psychology is telling us today, it is what the scriptures have spoken long ago. In those scriptures, whether it is the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, Bhagavad Gita, the Book of the Dead for the Egyptian, Egyptology. So all of these books are telling us it was ancient writings. Confucianism, all these are ancient writings were written before science became a thing. But out of those writings, religions were formed. And I think that's where things kind of went one way or the other, whoever, depending on who you ask. But in the bottom line is, there are books that are informing us something great. So I would borrow something from the scriptures. It says, faith comes by hearing. Remember here, faith comes by hearing. We must hear something that will elevate our faith. We must hear something that elevate our fear. So both faith and fear are learned. And according to some English writing here, and I'm going to go and bring it up quick, we are told, this is what I've learned. So I went and looked at the word faith. What English says. Faith is an English word that is originated from an old French word, fade. F-E-I-D, fade. I might be spelling it, I'm pronouncing it the wrong way, but it's F-E-I-D, fade. And that French word was derived from a Latin word, fides. Fides, however pronounced that word need. But both of these words, fade and fides, F-I-D-E-S, have several meaning: trust or belief. And that Latin word, fides, it is rooted from Indo-European word behid. I might be pronouncing differently, which is B-H-E-I-D, which meant to trust, to confide, to persuade. So the meaning have somewhat evolved, but yet anchored toward this idea of trust and belief. And so religious have taken upon it. Psychology might have called it something different. Science might call it different, but it is the same concept. That's what faith is. To believe, and you can believe based on what you heard. You can trust based on what you heard. So learning and information becomes critical. And that's why in the scriptures we're told, guess what? Faith comes by hearing. Of course, it goes further in hearing what? But first we're told it comes by hearing. So faith is this assumption that we make and believe that something is. So as fear, as I explained earlier, you heard something, and the way you minimize fear is a change of information. And if the information you receive or you hear changes, it changes or it reduces the degree of fear. As an example I gave you of a couple who are family friend. They were afraid based on the information they heard. When I provided clarity to that which they heard or knew about, it reduced their fear significantly. In fact, few days later or a week later, I heard from them they were chuckling on the phone, they were very happy, and they were talking about this idea that they were able to go and get the passport for their child. So they acted on information all along. They had information that paralyzed their action. Just like the lady I gave you an example on earlier. She was not able to cross the road because she was afraid. It's the same road. When the cars were no longer there, she was able to cross. I crossed where the car was still there because that road, there was a zebra crossing line that gave me the right of way. Having an understanding of that, I trust that the drivers understand that. So therefore, I went and passed through. Not only that I trust the driver understood that, is because I saw them stopping to give me the right of way. So those factors, the line, as well as their actions, informed me that I am safe to cross the road. So the fear that would have been there in absence of those two factors were eliminated. And so I became faithful. So absence of it could have created fear. Presence of it, it gave I heard by observing, and I saw that two cars stopped. I saw a zebra crossing line, and therefore it informed me. And the hearing here is not the only hearing we hear from outside, is the hearing we do it internally. Actually, that's the fact. Is that which we hear internally, is that affect either faith or enhances the fear. So in my case, I saw, and as based on what I saw, I heard in my own mind that it's safe to cross. And I put faith on the law, that the law requires them to stop. The zebra crossing gives me the right of way. And I acted consistently. And therefore, I was able to cross. But my colleague or the lady that was before me did not. Because of whatever reason was going in her mind, she heard something different. And therefore, she did not act. So faith comes by hearing. So we are told. So we must hear something. If faith comes by hearing, and fear also comes by hearing. Whatever we hear, that which we tell ourselves inside our mind. Yes, sometimes we hear from outside, just like my friends. They heard it from outside, but they rehear it in their mind because they repeat that which they heard from outside, and by repeating to themselves, they heard it. And from that which they heard, they acted consistent with the information. And therefore, they were paralyzed even to go and ask for a passport for their child. But the moment they got the counter information, I told them something, they reheard it in their mind. So they heard something and act accordingly. and therefore change the circumstances that once fearful. And they got the outcome that was desirable. Their son have an updated passport, and he is still deemed to be a United States citizen. So the only thing they needed to do is they took the passport that is valid. They went to the immigration office in their country and presented and asked to extend the permit for their child to stay. And the solution was solved. The problem was solved. So let's go to this faith. So in order to build faith, we must hear. That's the key important. If you keep hearing the things that affirm that there is a terrible thing, the terrible thing is likely to happen, you will be paralyzed from moving forward. You will not be able to move forward. You will remain where you are. You will continue to behave in the manner that you have. Most people fail to succeed in life because they have information that tells them the level of uncertainty to move forward is greater. They are concerned and afraid that taking a step forward, the uncertainty level is higher. As the example I provided earlier, to cross the road, if you put a rope, even though there might be a cushion under that rope, the rope might be 5 feet, 6 feet, 7 feet. But if I don't know that there is a mattress underneath it that will catch me, will cushion my fall, I'll be terrified to walk. In fact, I will not even take a step on that rope. I don't want to walk on the rope and go down there. Heck no. I don't care how many people I see going that rope. I would not. But the moment I have the knowledge that there's a mattress, a air thing that can catch me and cushion my fall, and I won't get hurt, I am in for the excitement. That will be an excitement, an exploration. Let me go for it because I know I am safe. The level of uncertainty is reduced, and therefore I approach with life or that particular act differently. So let's go back to this word where we're told faith comes by hearing. I just want to use that as an anchor here. In the scriptures, we're told faith comes by hearing, and hearing the word of God. That's what we're told. Faith comes by hearing. So hearing what? By hearing the word of Christ, actually. That's what it said. Romans 10:17. And Christ, we are told in the very beginning in the book of John, in the beginning there was a word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. Later we are told that word is Christ himself. But Apostle Paul comes and explains his word is the power and the wisdom of God. So if we take all of these information that further enhance our understanding of this Christ being the power and the wisdom of God, and Christ is the Spirit, having all of this, and Christ is the Word, and this Word is nothing more than your desire to be better than the best. And he said, I have come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. So all of those, the situation that adds life to your life and make it more abundantly is the very wisdom and the power of God. So your desire to be better, because being better is the very life. Better than the best you've ever had is the abundance, to have life and have it more abundance. So today, you are looking for peace of mind. And you're told, have faith in that peace of mind. Today, you are looking for financial breakthrough. You're told to have faith on Christ. If you keep saying, in the name of Jesus, I have faith. If we do an interview a poll that we go and ask people, there are millions and millions of people who are saying that every single day. And millions of them have died, keep saying that word, and they have never seen a light of day on that which they've been saying about. In the name of Jesus, I'm healed. In the name of Jesus, I'm rich. In the name of Jesus, I'm that. Many millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people are saying that, and they have not seen the outcome. There must be something more than that, what they're saying. If you look at all of these other elements, what Christ symbolizes or implies, as Apostle Paul described, as the Gospel of John tells us, therefore if we understand that, we can build faith in a more practical and meaningful manner than ever before. And I've seen people, when I interviewed people who have said in the name of Jesus and experienced miracle, when you ask them, there's something unique that they do that the rest doesn't. So I have an example. There was a lady that she almost everything she prayed for, she almost get it. I mean, most of the time she gets it. So when I was interviewing her, I asked her, tell me, when you pray, what do you do different? So she told me, it's very simple. If there was one time she needed a particular amount of money because she was in need of that funding to be able to meet a certain obligation that came upon her. She said, when she prayed for it, she used the same statement, in the name of Jesus, I have it. She did not say, let's God's will for me to have it. She did not say, oh, in the name of Jesus, I might have it. She said she have it. And she knew the due date, and she assumed that she had gotten the money already. When she walked there, she didn't care what happens. She walked in understanding that she have it. She didn't ask for God's will, because God's will is very simple. It is my plan for you to have life and have it more abundantly. And I'm going this because it's a text that is available that we can borrow from. Psychology informs us the same way. Psychology tells us where the energy is, where the focus is, so is our highest level of actions become. Science informs us the same thing. Psychology says focus, neuroscience tells us energy. Where there's energy, everything else flows. Where our attention is, our energy flows. Where we focus, so we become our highest action is based on where we pay our attention on. We see this always. Sometimes, like for instance, here at home, my kids will be busy in their gadgets on their phone, and you will call them 3, 4, 5 times and nobody's responding because they're completely lost. They've put their focus on their gadgets. You have to yell. Huh? I'm like, okay. You didn't hear me yelling, calling all this time? Because where their focus is, their highest level of actions becomes consistent with that focus. So it is true in when people, because I wanted to answer that question, where people say they are praying, is they are praying, they do not they keep saying in Jesus' name, but they are not tying it to that which they are asking or seeking. And they're not assuming as if they have that which they are once seeking. They will never have the results. And that's what is happening. I gave you the example of the lady. She always, when she used these words, she knows that she have that which she have asked. So therefore, her focus is in that which she have said, and her highest action will be on that direction. And therefore, because of those two things, her emotions, so as her thoughts and imagination, are invested on the idea that she has it. Therefore, she must have. Circumstances will align themselves to provide the favor she's looking for. That is the secret here. So faith can be improved by learning. And what do we learn? Change the information. And how do we change our information? We assume that which we the end result is true. Because faith is a substance of. It is an element of trust. It is an element of belief. What are you believing? What are you trusting that you have? It is not about what happens. It is the knowledge you have and if you trust it. I gave you an example of the lady. I was crossing the road with her. I crossed the road before her, but she was there before me. The cars had stopped before I got there. And yet she did not cross the road despite of the presence of the crossing line. She had whatever information she had paralyzed her reaction in the presence of the cars. When the cars went by and there was no other car around, then she crossed. She had the information that told her something different than the information I had. And because of the information I had, afforded me to cross consistent with the right that was given to me in that moment. So, to change or improve the level of faith you have to be willing to change the information you have. Because it is the information. And this information is not only that which I read, it is that which I have in my mind. We constantly regurgitate things in our mind. We're constantly repeating and talking about these things in our mind. And because we're constantly speaking of these things in our mind, guess what we must do? We must change that which we regurgitate, that which we repeat within ourselves, to reflect that which we want in life. And it is in that we have focused, we have trust on our information, which is going to be consistent with the intended result at that moment, at that instance, based on that which we are facing. In today's world, where it seems to be significant events of uncertainty happens, those events are bound to happen. And they have the right of happening. Our responsibility is not to fight against the information, rather to transcend ourselves by acquiring new understanding that will neutralize or minimize the level of risk that we would face in absence of the new information. Leaders might be facing uncertainty level in their workplace because of maybe new policies that are coming in or because of the new demand direction the market is going. And instead of feeding on the activities of the market, because those activities are bound to happen, you cannot control those events. Just like as a society, we've learned not to try to control rain when it rains, or sunshine when it's sun when it's sun shining. Instead, we have found mitigating factors to minimize our exposure to those events. So those who are highly exposed to sun, they will use sunburn to protect their skin. And those who want to go out when it's raining without wet themselves, guess what? They have an umbrella. We are not fighting the event. We're not changing the information, because those information have the right to exist, and fighting against them sometimes does not change but stresses us, put us in a place where we continue to suffer furthermore from the consequences of the existence of those information, whether those informations are new policies, whether those information is market driven, whether those informations are of any nature or particular activities that have a significant effect or disturb our peace. So the key here, just as we have consumed particular information to elevate our fear, we must be willing to change the direction by consuming a different type of information. And you might say, Alpha, listen, I hear this information, I read it on the paper. But when you read, you had an option to consume that information and made your own. So, and you made your own by listening to it again. Not only that you listened to it again, you talked about it in your own mind even after you left the information. The information was in the paper, it was on the TV, it was somewhere where you read, you had a conversation with somebody, and you could leave that conversation alone after you walk away from the instance when it became close to you. But yet you carried with you. It's like an example I heard, a story about two monks, a master monk and a student monk. As they were walking back to the temple, they were crossing this a little water, what you want to call, maybe a little water flow. It's not maybe a river. I mean, let's call it a river, but it was a small water stream. Was kind of cross. They had to cross. As they got to that water stream, there was a lady who was contemplating how to cross it. She wanted to take her shoes and be able. So she's trying to decide how to do it. The older monk decided to say, what I have sandals. I can hold my sandals. And actually, my intent was to hold my sandal and walk on this water because it's a little bit long. It's more, the depth is there, but not too much. So I can carry you in my back. And the younger monk, the student monk, was like, okay, I thought we're not supposed to have contact with women, with female. But the older monk put the female on his back and crossed that stream of water. When they got on the other side, he kind of went down a little bit, and the lady came out of her back. And the lady was very gracious for the fact that the monk were kind enough to offer a piggyback ride. And they went on their way, and they were quiet throughout the journey of maybe a 2-3 miles walk. But before they got to the temple, the student monk was like, no, he said, Master, can I ask you a question? He said, go ahead, student. He said, what happened about an hour or so ago? You carried that woman on your back, and I thought we're not supposed to carry women on the back. So the teacher monk said, who actually carried the woman the longest? I carried the woman and dropped her as we crossed the stream. It was less than 2 minutes. You've carried this woman on your back from the time we get out from that stream all the way to this point. So if it is wrong, you are on the most wrong side. And you wonder, what the heck? What does it have to do with anything? You, by hearing particular information, you made a choice to think about it. And therefore, not only that you thought about it, you rethink about it, you reanalyze it. And the more you spend time to think about it, you are doing that which is not allowed. It is not allowed for you to be anxious. It's not allowed for you to be heightened and worried and fearful because of the information you are digesting. So information is not only cause a physical harm, a pain or fear, but it also have a psychological impact on your body, and you're toxifying your own body because of the hormones that are being released. You are just so as a whole is not a healthy and acceptable way of living. But you choose not because you're a bad person, because you don't know how to change it. So you think about it, but you didn't know that you had a choice to leave the information like the master monk who decided to carry the woman, but dropped her and never thought about it again. I don't know what kind of thoughts were going on this student monk. He could have felt what it feels to have a woman on your back, what it feels like this part of her body pressing on your. I mean, so much thoughts that was going on this student monk that the master had completely forgot. And that's what we do most of the time. We carry on these things in our mind. We regurgitate them. We think about them. We elevate. We do this. We do all kinds of things to the information. and they continue to hurt us. But it begins with a choice to read, to hear, to listen. And knowing that you have a choice to leave that information at that point because it is not pleasant to you. It is not meaningful to you. And therefore, that's why the wisest teachers of the scriptures or the writers of the scriptures, they told us, guard your heart. Guard your heart. Protect your sense of hearing. Protect yourself from emotional damage, from emotions that are not productive. They are not cultivating you to become your greatest self. In this world, there will always be tribulation. But the choice we have is whether we engage with such information about tribulation or we choose not. And today you know you have a choice. But how do you execute this choice? I promise that I'm going to give you a framework that you can use to be able to alleviate this particular problem at any moment in time. The framework is called a 3I framework. And it's only a 3-step framework that is done mentally, have nothing to do with physically. So you don't have to go and buy something. You don't have to go and drink something. You don't have to do all of these things, all these rituals, none of that. It have to be done in your mind. The first I is called idealization. Idealization is a 2-step process. The first process is identifying your pain. So where are you today, or what have you heard today that is not pleasant to your ear? What makes you uncomfortable, in other words? So today, whatever you are facing, experiencing that makes you uncomfortable becomes our beginning place. Faith does not exist in absence of fear. Faith exists in the presence of fear. So if you are praying or you're seeking to be a faithful servant, you must be fearful first. It is in the place of fear where faith is developed. If there's no fear, there's nothing to be faithful for. Can you be faithful for what you already have? No, because faith is a perception. It's a perceived value. It's not a real thing. Just as fear is a perceived value. You perceive something to be present. And by perceiving it, your psychological indicators kicks in, or reactors. They kick in, and therefore you behave consistent with the information as governed by those indicators or reactors. So the first I, we identify the pain point, that which we've heard that is not pleasant. If you think it from that point of view, you say, I've heard A, B, C, D, and I'm not happy of what I heard. It makes me uncomfortable. It makes me fearful. It makes me feel ill. Or I saw something that makes me uncomfortable. Or I read something that makes me feel, So now we have identified that which makes you feel, Once we identify that, we turn the clock and say, just let's name what is the opposite of it. So an example of the friends that I told you before, they heard about an executive order. It's an executive order. What do? Somebody already issued an order. And by hearing that order, they were able to connect with something in their life, and therefore they were affected by the order, or their son will be affected by that order. So they perceived. So that's an example. It's a real thing. So what they heard is something that was making them uncomfortable or deny their son the right to be that which is. Today, you hear news, you see news, you read about news or information or event, and those information, it might be a bank statement that comes and say you have insufficient fund. It might be a credit report that says you cannot borrow because you are not credit worthy. and you need to borrow in order to do particular things, so you are afraid that you might not be able to carry on the task that you need to carry on because of the report present before you. So there are many things that can come to us with that they have negative implication because of their presence or because of the information that is disclosed within it, like a credit report, bank statement, doctor's report, executive order, market report. All of these are information that can come to us, and by mere presence of that information, they deny us the right to be that which we want to be, which can be having a peace of mind, going to work, having your retirement build up, having a healthy body. Suddenly you're told you're not healthy. It happened to me. We decided we were changing life insurance to another company that was providing better services. Uh, and so because of, I don't know, the level of the life insurance or the some of the questions we answered, they said that we needed to do medical exam. And we said, I mean, I work out, my wife works out, and we were all like, we're good. We're like, okay, let's do this. And suddenly I get a call and they said, oh, there's something we can't do because. I'm like, what do you mean you can't do it? And they said, oh, because of a healthy this thing and that. And I'm like, what do you mean? I said, oh, we took this and there was something that doesn't make sense. We want more information on it. And I'm like, what? I didn't know that that thing exists, and it was jeopardizing me from getting the life insurance I was looking for. But taking that forward, so it's either I dwell on that information or I change the direction of the information I have. And I chose to change the information I had. So instead of dwelling on it, I apply the very framework. I idealize it. First, I identify the pain point. The pain point is this medical record says A, B, C, D. But the alternative of that is to say, guess what? I don't have that condition. What is the opposite? The medical issue or in question is no longer in place. I couldn't change the actual medical condition, but I could change how I see things. Instead of keep saying, oh, I cannot even have it, I changed the mindset. I identify something different. And then I went to the second I, introduced. I had to introduce that which I had identified. Instead of just saying that this condition does not exist or medical issue is not an impediment anymore, I made it personal. I identified. So the first step, you are shifting your focus. The second step, you identified yourself with the place you are focusing on. I said, I am of a good condition and I have this life insurance I need. I visualizing it. I felt about being there. And by doing so, it changed my perspective. Guess what? That insurance did not go through. We got a call from another insurance company. And when I gave them the same answer, they said, we don't care about that. It's okay. You're good. We'll give you life insurance. I got a life insurance without the issue of medical condition. Of course, I've worked out to address the issue, but it didn't matter anymore because I changed my perspective, my point of view. That's the second I introduce. The third I is iterate. So if you introduce the idea that makes you feel good, which is the opposite of that which makes you feel bad, you have to personalize it. And sometimes personalization doesn't change the way you feel. It's not enough because maybe the intensity is very high. You have to iterate, meaning that you have to repeat the process over and over. You have to make the constant thoughts in your mind. And by repeating that frequently, it changes the mood. Suddenly, you identify yourself with that new idea. And because you identify yourself with that new idea, it changes how you look at the thing in question. And as a result, it changes you and your experience or your relationship with. As the story of the lady who was hitting a lion thinking it's a dog, it is the understanding the person had changed the relationship she had with the lion. Even the lion was terrified by the lady. But when the lady realized it was a lion, she paralyzed. She lost conscious. She was so shocked to a point she lost conscious. Today you have a choice. Either you choose the path of fear, it will paralyze you from being the person you want to be. It will make you unhealthy, or you have a choice to choose faith. But the choice is not another, it's yours. And I welcome you to be able to get to learn more how to actually practically apply this process by checking out one of my courses. It's called Thrive Beyond Results. Another one is the Year of Jubilee. So if you're very religious and you love to learn things through the scriptures, the Year of Jubilee is the right course for you. And that course providing you breakdown of the same process from the point of view of the scriptures. And there's practices in the class and everything else to help you enhance your ability to achieve the goal. And so is Thrive Beyond Results. In fact, Thrive Beyond Results is based on the book I've written. But regardless, the class also providing the environment and tools and resources that further enhance your journey in becoming the person you want to be. Not in absence of fear, but in the presence of fear, but walking with confidence and a higher degree of certainty. I appreciate for taking the time and joining me in this brief moment that we had this conversation. Please like this video, give me some thumbs up, and tell me so that I can continue to create these type of episodes more. Subscribe so that new ones can you can notify you when they come online. Ring that bell so that you can get the notification. Share with your friends so they too not be paralyzed by the fear, but they may grow and rise beyond or thrive beyond with the help of faith. Until then, I'll be back.